our Facebook Live event here that PwC is holding. We're excited to be here in Boston, and today, we have an exciting guest with us. My name's Mike Baccala. I am the Assurance Innovation Leader at PwC. I have with me the Dean of the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University, Andrew Moore. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about artificial intelligence. And we have a number of questions that we'll throw out there, and it'll be an interesting 15 minutes. Hopefully, we'll get a lot out of this discussion. So Andrew, we, in the last few months, put together a paper on predictions for AI in 2018. They're really more short-term in nature. I do want to touch on a few of those because I think there's some interesting topics that our clients would be interested in understanding at a deeper level. One of the first ones is really about nations will spar over AI. If you look at recently, whether it's China, the UK, Japan, even Canada, have all put out public strategies that they're trying to approach from an AI perspective. So you have nations getting more involved in this process. What are the implications of that from your perspective, and how should companies be looking at that more global trend and the impacts that it might have on us in the U.S. here?
So thanks, Mike. Firstly, thanks for this opportunity. I think this is a great event. This question of countries and AI is something which actually preys on my mind a lot. In the big universities in the US at the moment, we're really at ground zero for this, and we're watching as the pull on superstar faculty and our students is no longer just to and from the US. There's a real effort coming to get people around the world. I would say the answer is yes, I'm very concerned about it. I think that as soon as we get an asymmetry that one country is way ahead, that country will be able to use those tools to maintain and grow its advantage. One interesting measure is if you look at the papers appearing in the big artificial intelligence conferences, the international ones, about 10 years ago, 5% of them were from China. Now it's 50%. And if you look at the biggest multi-billion-dollar new companies formed around artificial intelligence, the majority of them are actually from China now. Means I've got nothing against China.
No.
I just have to say that
that's the reality.
We're going to be pushing quite hard right now.
Yeah, and I think in our study on that point, we looked out a few years at their investment, and it's significantly greater, we predict, than many of the other nations out there. I guess my follow-up question would be, from a U.S. perspective, we've been largely silent on that front. Do you have any perspective on what that means, and whether it's Silicon Valley and just the different clusters of where our innovation is happening around AI, or universities, but more broadly, how should the U.S. be looking at this?
So it's funny you should mention Silicon Valley. I do not think Silicon Valley is where the answers come from.
Okay.
It's easy to get excited about the big internet companies and what they're doing with
Right.
AI. But AI for the economy comes from the whole Fortune 500 group of companies. And it's just as important to me that we're being super advanced in the steel mills around Pittsburgh as that we're being super advanced in some Snapchat type filter or something.
Yeah, excellent, fair enough. So one other point that I would bring up that we have in our predictions is that AI will help answer the question around big data. Big data has been a journey over the last decade or so, that's gotten a lot of fanfare, big analytics, big data. A lot of companies have made a lot of investments. Sometimes they've been disappointed. Sometimes those have paid off. I think when we look at the perspective of getting real value out of those exercises now, AI has an opportunity to be one of those ROI drivers. So when you think about data in that whole journey, whether someone has started that or not, where does data play into this and the disciplines around data from an AI perspective?
Okay, I'm super passionate about this. One, I would always prefer a mere terabyte of well-indexed data over a few petabytes of unstructured data. And so one of the big things which drives me crazy is if I see an enterprise working hard to build a data lake or something called a data lake without the primary question being the data model so that you can do joins between your data sources which actually answer business questions. So If someone boasts to me, hey, our enterprise right now is having to work with 10 petabytes of data, I will yawn unless I see that there's good indexing of the data.
Yeah, so you raise a good point, and we find this when we're working with clients as well, in that the structuring process actually of that data is critically important. Having a purpose and a meaning and a question around that data is critically important. The idea of annotation of data, even if it is unstructured, you need a process to begin to drive structure, and AI can even help with that. NLP and various different aspects of that. When you think about companies that do this well, do they already solved that problem from a data perspective? Are they already on the structured path? When you look at the players out there who really do this well today,
I think so far companies have had to be pulled by big sort of information companies like Google and Amazon, sort of forcing them to obey certain data standards. And that's been where it happens. And until then, it's incredibly hard for any CIO or CTO to really go in there and stop people allowing unstructured fields or free, char 64 fields in databases, which eventually turn out to be the death of these kinds of big joins. There's one place where I actually would recommend pushing a little bit on this internally. Any company which has got an external web presence is probably beginning to use things like schema.org tags. Those schema.org tags, in many cases, are the precursors to a more general ability to have a data model.
Right.
And what's going on the search engine side is you take those tags and Google is doing the normalization to figure out what are the entities, where its search index can point to. I think getting involved in that is a really good way to start.
And I'd like to touch on that for a second, because you obviously have had prior experience, before coming into your role at the university here recently. When you think of even a Google and search, that wasn't just, pure compute power or random events. There was a structuring process even in search, right, that allowed this to happen. And I don't think most people even comprehend or maybe even understand that. And it's part of this question. It is about structure. It is about the tagging of that data to be able to actually run the optimization to get the answers you're looking for.
Yes. If you're looking at sort of what comes next after Siri or Alexa, it's interesting that among my faculty and students, it's not so much the speech understanding anymore. They kind of yawn at that. That's commodity work. The really hard part is being able to link the entities being referred to in the questions to the business objects which are actually out there. So again, if you're going to start up a question answering or automated agent or automated help system project, your first question is data models, and it's just to detail how you're going to do the NLP or speech.
And data models are not that sexy, but they're foundational.
Data models are super sexy.
We need to make them sexy again, right? So let me jump into the last point that I thought we would cover, and I think it would be helpful to the audience. One of the other predictions we make is that AI will come down to earth and get the work. And what we mean by that is there's been a lot of hyperbole around AI. Doom and gloom, it's going to disrupt the workforce entirely. And also really exciting, incredible edge cases of where AI is doing amazing things, or AlphaGo, or you can name any number of these kind of things that have happened over the last few years. But I think what we're starting to see is some more practical application of this. And I'll give an example from a PwC perspective. Not very exciting and maybe not like autonomous vehicles, but we have a lot of companies that are dealing with an accounting change in the leasing space, the lease accounting gap change. We're employing AI to help structure unstructured data that sits in a legal document. It doesn't get any more unstructured than that, right? And it's very complicated, but the whole point of it was, how do we enhance the process and reduce the time of review and extracting the right data elements out of that using a data model, using AI, to streamline that process and take out 60% of the effort of data acquisition in a very unstructured world. That's pretty practical, may sound boring, but it's the kind of thing that I think AI can bring real ROI to. How would you encourage companies to start thinking about this, and do you see this coming down the road a little bit more than maybe what we've seen in the news and the press?
Very much so. I think that the interesting thing about artificial intelligence is it's incredibly artificial. That no matter what you might read or hear about, there is no technology out there which is simulating actual human cognition processes. Yeah. We're performing parlor tricks with massive computation to do very impressive things which we used to think required big intelligence, like playing poker or Go or driving a vehicle. What I often see is we, in all kinds of ways, retrain folks who have been trained up previously in OR or computer science to be good at bringing in artificial intelligence into an organization. And the reaction when they get it is they're excited because they realize there's so much you can do with off-the-shelf machine learning, computer vision, ironically, linear programming, constraint satisfaction. And that's usually the components to build this. So the reaction we get is, wait, that's all that AI is? And it's not, there's no magic. I think the message is really important because you have to get your organization happy to own and do AI work itself, not say, well, that's so fancy, we better hire Carnegie Mellon or some other geniuses to do it for us.
And I think you raise a good point. Since we have a few minutes left, I would like to touch on this. There's been an awful lot of discussion and debate around the fact that, you know, the future of work, the future of the human in the equation, right? And, you know, we have a couple predictions that kind of go to, well, it may be premature to worry too much about that. There's still an awful lot that the human can and needs to do for AI to be successful. Everything from what's the data model, what question am I answering? Supervised learning requires human intervention, right, to improve the models, to the analysis and even to a perspective when you take it at a macro level. There's going to be ethical questions, there's going to be governance, there's going to be transparency needed in some ways so that it continues to be a productive part of business and society. So maybe speak to that a little bit because it's a topic that's out there and just where the human fits into this equation from your perspective.
So I am not super optimistic about this. I do see the possibility of large job losses, at least for a period. I don't want to push that away, even though many economists are pretty confident we're not going to see that. The fact is, it is pretty straightforward now in some industries to just go through and automate a whole bunch of stuff. The biggest risk, and I think this is like a black swan risk, is how the society will react to that. If we get into a place where, in a similar way to the reaction you've seen to globalization, where automation gets a bad name and automation is associated with evil or against the population of a country, I can see very serious questions which may even raise to the level of national security questions to do with the pointy-headed elites doing all of this stuff and 90% of the country left behind. I think that is a serious risk. Sure.
And I think the question I would have for most people is, obviously that risk is out there. It could be a black swan. There are still pieces of this equation in the short run that I would say for us even to get to that point, there's still a lot of human involvement that's going to be needed, right?
I can see that.
The question is the duration and length and term of when that event might occur, I think. And it's a fascinating question. It's one that I think we all need to pay a lot of attention to, whether it's from a public perspective, from a university perspective with research, and you guys are doing a lot of research around this, and even from a business perspective. So this has been exciting. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. All of our predictions are on our website, and you can find them at pwc.com. There will be some questions that may have come up as we've done the live stream. We will tackle them later and probably put them in a blog, and Andrew and I will circle back on that. Thank you again for joining us today for the event, and we look forward to maybe doing this again sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.